Hello, everybody, and thank you for coming to today's webinar. My name is Jonathan Bass, and I'm a content marketing manager over at RevenueWell. Um, I am just so excited to be here at this webinar. Um, One of my favorite people that we work with here, Lacey Phillips, one of the co-founders of Practice Dynamics. She's hilarious. She's bubbling with personality. You'll be able to tell in the first 30 seconds of her talking. The way things are going to go today is as soon as I hop off here, Lacey's going to give her presentation. We're going to have a Q&A at the end, so stick around, ask any questions during it. If you have anything, you can shoot me a little text here in the box, and we're just going to have a good time. So that's all for me. Lacey, the floor is yours. Let's do this.
Woo, what an introduction. I feel like I have to start with a cheer or something to make sure I have this whole energy and keep everybody excited here. Welcome. Thank you first, of course, to RevenueWell for inviting me to reach out to the listeners, reach out to the Wellers. I love you guys, and I appreciate RevenueWell and all the listeners today. Please shoot us your questions. Let us know if this stuff pertains to you, if it works for you, if you have questions about what we're going to talk today. For me today, it's all about systems, teams, and technology. At Practice Dynamics, we believe in balance. Work-life balance, the balance in the dentist office, from the business office to the clinical team to the hygiene team. It's all about creating that balance and then getting your success from that balance. So for us, there are three main components to getting that balance that everybody is seeking for. And believe me, we have dentists call us, we have office managers call us and say, I just feel like everything's a little bit out of balance. So how do we start to take the things that are overwhelming to you, the chaos that could be in your office, or the questions that you have, and how do we bring all of that together to create the success for you? The very first thing we start with is systems. I like to describe systems as that network of everything coming together. Your policies, your procedures. Think of this as a how-to in the dental office. I had one client say to me, okay, I think I get it, Lacey. If I'm hit by a bus on my way home tonight, how does the office function without me? And while that's a little bit drastic, and I'm concerned about her thinking she might get hit by a bus on her way home tonight, that's exactly what we want to think of systems as. As a matter of fact, my guess is going to be you have a lot of systems already. You just may not have them organized like you want them to be. For example, the very first thing we do when we're looking at systems is we categorize them. We put them into very defined categories so that they're easier for us to work with. Let me give you some categories here. Hopefully you have a pen and paper. Write these categories down. We have ownership, administrative / HR, business, clinical, hygiene, and marketing. There's a ton of different policies, procedures that fall under these categories. So what I want you guys to do is start thinking about these categories and maybe even create a checklist to help you identify what items go under each category. For example, under ownership, maybe you're going to have, excuse me, maybe you're going to have your vision and your mission statement. And you need to get your financial house in order. So for example, your P&L statement, when do you get it? How often do you get it? What exactly is a P&L statement and what does that mean to you? On your vision and mission, everything in your office should revolve around your vision and your mission statement. I'm a Google girl. The top one is Google's vision, to provide access to the world. I think they do an amazing job with that. Their mission statement then is to organize all of that information and make it universally accessible and useful to the masses. So everything in your dental practice should revolve around that vision and that mission statement. And this comes from ownership. So this might be one of the very first things you're going to have under the ownership category. The next thing that we'll talk about is strategic planning with our ownership. Do you guys have strategic planning? When do you plan for the future? How far in the future do you plan? Is the entire team involved in your strategic planning? These are all policies that fall under that ownership. And we can actually dive deeper into these in a later time. Maybe Jonathan and I'll come back together and we can really dive into strategic planning at some point. But right now, I'm giving you some of these policies that are going to fall under your different categories. Another item that you're going to have underneath is your KPI tracking. What is KPI? Key performance indicators. For example, this is your production, net and gross. These are your adjustments. For example, your insurance adjustments. We also look at net collection, gross collection. We look at your hygiene department. What percentage of your hygiene department is your overall production? And we have some real healthy numbers and percentages that we look at when you're tracking your KPIs. The purpose of the tracking is to get the health of the business. It's really to monitor your business. How healthy is it? Again, this is going to follow under your ownership category. So I gave you a few examples for ownership. Let's talk about the administrative category. What different items are you going to have under administrative? You may have everything from your annual planning, paid time off. How does continuing education work in an office? What kind of team communication and activities do you have? Inter-office communication. Do you guys have a closed Facebook page just for your team that you use? What about team building activities? Monthly, quarterly, annually? Letters, forms, and consents. We put these under administrative because they really have something to do with the entire office, not just the business office, but clinical and hygiene as well. What reports are we running? These could be daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly reports. Any systems manual that you have or that you're putting together, as well as HR manuals. Now remember, your HR manual is a legal document. It's legal, state laws, federal laws on the things that you have to do. And then of course, administrative is also going to include your payroll services, business accounting. And as we're speaking of HR, that legal HR manual, we recommend every single office have a legal HR manual that is specific to their state and their state laws. Included in this, it doesn't have to be the legal part of it, but we do put it under the HR category, job descriptions. I'm always amazed when I go into offices and people don't have real job descriptions. I feel like we all want them. Like, who wants to actually be called a receptionist in the dental practice? Heck no, we want to be like the patient care coordinator or the scheduling coordinator, the financial coordinator, the insurance coordinator. We have so many different titles up there. Let's make it official. Makes us feel good about our job. How many of you right now have hiring, onboarding, and training processes in place? This is one of the biggest items we find is missing in dental practices. For example, what exactly is your policy on hiring? Who does it? How do you advertise? When do you do your interviews for it? And then once you've actually hired somebody, what's the onboarding process? Do we throw them in a chair, give them a phone, tell them to answer the phone like this, and then answer all of the patient's questions? So what's your onboarding process? Is it 30, 60, 90 days? And then do you have it broken down for training? Training purposes isn't just for new employees. Existing employees should always have continuing education as well. So do you have this clearly lined out? Reviews and evaluations. This is a big one. Everybody thinks when we get our annual reviews, we get a raise or a bonus, when in fact, they really shouldn't have anything to do with money. We're going to talk about reviews and evaluations. How did you do your job? What were the goals we set forth for you? And were you able to accomplish those goals? Not necessarily does the practice have the ability, did we have the growth that we needed in order to have raises or bonuses? Two completely different things. Do you have that process laid out? Oh, here's a big one. Conflict management. We all have it. You're going to have it in any business that you're in. But how do you handle the conflict? Do you run from it? Are you one of those memes where your head is in the sand and everything else is sticking up in the air because you hate dealing with conflict? We find that actually having a plan and a system in place on how to deal with that conflict can get your head right out of the sand and make it so much more comfortable for everybody in the long run. And of course, we have to have a system for salary and benefits. Can we even afford to bring new people on for that hiring, onboarding, and training process? These are all key items that we have listed under our HR category. So let's move along to the business part of the office. Now, a lot of you probably call it the front desk, right? Or maybe it's short, the front. If you guys have ever heard me speak, you know what I'm fixing to say right now. A front desk is a piece of furniture. We are a business team in the business office, right? That's again why I like to have those job titles and job responsibilities clearly lined out. Think about it for a minute. We all call ourselves a front desk. It's crazy to me. All right, I'll get off my soapbox about that. Business policies, procedures that are going to fall under here. How do you start your day? Everything from where do you park in the morning, which door do you walk into, who turns the lights on, all of the computers, how do you sign into the software, what's your time clock information. So these are the startup procedures, and then at the end of the day, how do you physically, literally shut the office down? Are we doing daily reports at the end of the day? Do you batch all of your insurance claims and then at the end of the day you send everything out? So these are those policies that happen in business. Phone etiquette. What is our phone etiquette? Is there a certain way you would like for us to answer the phone? Once we have answered the phone, is there a system on where we take it from there? Verbal skills. We love verbal skills. I love to practice verbal skills. I love to do role playing just to make sure that our verbal skills are a direct recognition of the kind of care that our patients are going to get. Scheduling is, of course, a big one. Are we double booking the doctor? Some of you triple and quadruple book. I know these doctors are on skateboards sometimes. Block scheduling. Do we have certain items or certain procedures throughout the day that are blocked for optimum times? How about in the hygiene department? Do you have specific blocks for perio procedures? For new patients, are your new patients scheduled on the hygiene? So what are your scheduling procedures? Recare, recall, again, what is your recall system? Every single patient that leaves the practice has their next appointment, hopefully. And for those patients that just aren't ready to schedule right then and there, what's your follow-up process? How are you contacting those patients and keeping them active in the practice where they're not falling through the cracks? Patient communication. Are we using a third-party system, RevenueWell, to communicate with our clients? And I'm not just talking about text messages or email reminders. I love data mining. And what does that mean? I love the ability to reach into my software, be it SoftDent, Dentrix, EagleSoft, Open Dental, whatever you're using, the ability to reach into that software, grab key information that I'm looking for, and then send communication specifically to those patients. Let me give you an example. Let's say I want to send out a newsletter to all of my perio patients about heart healthy information and the fact that everything that happens in our mouth now affects everything else in our body. So I'm going to do some data mining through RevenueWell. I'm going to reach in and grab all of my active patients from the last 12 to 18 months that have had any kind of periodontal procedure. And then I'm going to send them this mass email, maybe it's a newsletter, about oral systemic health, keeping your appointment, and why we want our perio maintenance patients to maintain their health. That's amazing patient communication right there. Patient finances, collecting and aging. Here's one. How many of you, think about this right now, actually have a financial policy that every single patient in the practice receives? What I mean by that is, a financial policy is, this is how we deal with finances in our office. This is how we'll handle your insurance. These are your responsibilities. It's setting up expectations for every single patient in the practice. New patients should absolutely receive it. Existing patients should have one in their file. So do you have these policies in place? Insurance eligibility. Who do we call? How are we getting the breakdown of benefits? Are we using fax backs? Are we using a website? Are we using a third-party service to get all of our insurance information taken care of? And aging, boy, that's a big one, right? How often are you checking those aging accounts? Just so that you know, Bonnie and I, my partner at Practice Dynamics, we think healthy aging, your 90-day buckets should be at 0. They should be less than 3% of your overall aging. I bet you're going to have some questions about that. Case presentation. Who's actually presenting the plans? How are you presenting them? Where are you presenting them? And then who's actually following up on them and how? Another thing I love is the ability through RevenueWell to send these really cool videos on, hey, I know I diagnosed a couple of fillings for you, and here's why I diagnosed it. You have decay. We need to get that taken care of. So a quick video from the actual doctor that goes out to patients with unscheduled treatment, powerful, so powerful. And then, of course, documentation. Do you have a policy on how you document things in your office? For example, if it has to do with finances or insurance, where does that documentation go? If it has to do with patient phone calls, where does that documentation go? And these are just a few, you guys. There's lots and lots of policies and procedures that go under business. Let's take a look at clinical real quick. What goes under your clinical checklist? Charting and scheduling, documentation from the clinical area. Are they scheduling the patient's next appointment? What kind of charting are you doing? Existing, other, diagnosing your treatment and building a treatment plan. And of course, where does your documentation go? We have to have a policy for sterilization, OSHA, and equipment management. X-rays and photos. This can be simple. We absolutely do an FMX or a pano on every single new patient that walks through the door. And then how often do we update those X-rays? And what's your policy on intraoral photos? Room setup and tear down. Also procedures. This is a really cool tray setup and supplies. I got to tell you, one of our doctors in Louisiana, she is very specific about how she wants her room set up and her trays set up. So she physically set the room up the way she wanted it, took a picture of her tray set up, all of the supplies and the instruments, and then sent it to us to drop that screenshot into her SOP manual. It was amazing. And now future employees, team members that come on board have a clear picture of exactly what she expects. What's your policy on lab case management? What labs are you working with? When do they go out? Do they come and pick them up? Do you ship them out to them? How do they get back to your office? These are all excellent policies that are going to go under your clinical checklist. Hygiene. Scheduling. Hygienists scheduling their next appointment in the operatories. Patient record keeping, which is what are they charting? Where does that charting go? Documentation, of course. Soft tissue management program or your periodontal program. Exactly what are your guidelines? Are you using the ADA guidelines for perio? And education, of course. Recare is a big one. Hygiene supplies, is somebody specifically in charge of that? Do you have a budget for that? And then, of course, verbal skills for hygiene. I love verbal skills in hygiene, and I want our entire team to be on board with the exact same verbal skills. Why? Because sometimes patients ask our business team members more questions than they ask the hygienist. So it's super important for us all to be on the exact same page. Now, remember, I said marketing is one of your categories. What's going to fall under marketing? How are you marketing? What social sites are you currently using? What are the logins, the passwords, the administrators, the editors? Do you have, excuse me, do you have a social media campaign? Is it weekly? Is it monthly? How exactly does that work? Patient communication sometimes falls under that marketing, right? And those email campaigns. What about social events? Community events. Do we participate once a year, every quarter? What are those events? And what kind of marketing budget do we include with that? And then website maintenance. Who's in charge of the website? How often do you update it? Here's one of my favorites. How many of you listening right now, or if you're going to listen later, have team members, pictures and bios on your website that no longer work for you? I know some of you right now are laughing. So it's that website maintenance, making sure everything is up to date. So you're probably thinking right now, that was a lot of information in a very short amount of time. And I'm telling you, that is the tip of the iceberg. There's a ton of policies and procedures that you should have in every single dental office. So where do you start? How do you tackle this mountain? And I'm going to tell you, start with your checklist. If you don't have current checklist, reach out to us. We have some checklists we'd be more than happy to discuss with you. And the ultimate project here is for you to create a living, breathing, customized SOP manual, standard operating procedure manual. Think about the best restaurant that you've ever gone to in your life and the best service, the best food. That didn't happen on accident. 100%, they have policies, they have procedures, they have a manual that everybody follows. That's what we need in the dental office. That's going to be your ultimate goal to your systems. Whew, that's a lot of information, right? Let's jump into our teams, the second aspect of creating your balance-driven success. I find teams really are the foundation to our success. And if right now you're thinking, I'm not so sure my team is, this is where we're going to come into play, right? So how many team members should we have? How many do you have right now? Are you understaffed? Are you overstaffed? Let's look first at administrative and business team. Depending on the size of your practice, the amount of patients that you see, and the success of your business, you may need to have an office manager that actually works with your team, your patients, and your business. Maybe you just have an administrator, which is normally more business focused, looking at the health, the numbers, the KPIs, and the metrics, and not necessarily the team. We love to have a patient care coordinator. Think of this person as the face of the practice. When somebody walks in or the first time the phone rings, this is the person answering the phone the first or greeting patients as they come in for their appointment. Typically, they're in charge of our schedules, making sure that the doctor is staying busy and the hygienist are staying busy. And then you have your financial insurance coordinator, which is your money gal or money guy, right? These people love to take money. They love to take other people's money, and they're good at it. They don't have a lot of emotion in this. And so it's very important to put people in the right roles to go with what they're best at. Rather than just throw somebody in a chair and see if they're the best fit, let's ask some questions. Let's maybe even take a personality or a listening test to kind of find out where is the best place for these people in our office. Because once we put them in the right seat, we give them the training that they need and that they deserve, you're going to start to see less stress on ownership, right? You're going to see our office managers don't nearly have to macro or micro manage because everybody knows what their job is. They're trained to do their job, and they're super happy to be doing that job. I really find a big part of unhappy teams is one of two things. Number one, they're in the wrong seat. Good employee, show up, they're loyal, but they're not doing what they're passionate about and what they're really good at. And the second part of that is training. Training, training, training. I am a huge proponent of education and making sure that our teams are fully trained and constantly trained in order to do their job to the best of their ability. Now, when it comes to your clinical team, who do you have? And do you have enough of them? Are you in a state that requires a CDA? Do you have the expanded duty dental assistants? How do you know if you have enough of them? And I'm just going to bring this up because I find this a lot. We didn't know if we were understaffed or overstaffed, so we hired, and I'm doing my hands in quotation marks right now, a floater. Well, first of all, people, I don't know about you, but I don't want to be called a floater. It's just weird, right? And it makes life really difficult for this person because you never know exactly where you're supposed to be. You know that the business team needs help. You know that the clinical team needs help, but where exactly are you supposed to be at what time of day? And if you're in the clinical, business is pretty sure you should be there. If you're in the business office, clinical thinks, what are you doing up there? So being again, I'm doing it in quotation marks, floater is a very difficult position in the dental office. Why don't we just figure out at what time of day do we really, really need a business team member and hire somebody part-time? At what time of day do we really, really need help with the clinical and make sure that we have part-time help back there rather than having somebody go back and forth? On our hygiene, again, there's a science to hygiene and how many hygienists you really should have in your practice. Now, Bonnie and I believe at least 35% of your overall production should come from your hygiene department. I'm going to repeat that. At least 35% of your overall production should come from your hygiene department. Now, how do I figure that out? I'm going to take a look. How many active patients do I have in the system? And I'm not talking about just the word active that our software allows us to attach to patients. I'm talking about compliant patients. I'm talking about patients that come to their appointments, they're on time, they pay their bill. Active patients, how many do we currently have in the system? Now let's take a look at how many patients need to come in. So how many patients in the last 6 months were due for their appointment but didn't come in? Now let's take a look at the future. How many patients in the next 6 months are due for their hygiene appointment and don't have an appointment? So I'm looking at this in 3 areas. How many active patients do we have in the hygiene department right now? How many in the past 6 months do I need to reactivate? And how many in the next 6 months do I need to call and schedule? This is going to help you figure out how many hygiene hours you need daily, weekly, monthly, and how many hygienists it's going to take to fill those hours. That's a tricky one. That's what we were just talking about, tracking that past, present, future, right? Now with our teams, I said this in the beginning. Do you have job descriptions, and are you have you set up your expectations? Because what I find is that a lot of times team members don't exactly know what is expected of them. And that's a really difficult position to be in. How do you know how to exceed somebody's expectations if you have no idea what their expectations are? And of course, you need to be prepared in knowing what can you pay. What is the average? What is the average that people are being paid for this position? Are you in that average? Can you pay that bill? And then can you provide your team with benefits as well? Part of this, that hiring process. How are you advertising now? Are you doing traditional advertising? Indeed.com is working really well for several of our clients. And do you have your ads all together? You know, having a really distinct ad with great verbal skills can possibly bring in the candidates that you're looking for. Who does the interviewing? I'm all for one person does the initial interview, and then we need that team to have buy-in, give them a say on these people. So we take them to lunch maybe, or they meet after hours at one location outside of the office so that they can get an idea of this person, and then we allow them to have some feedback on this. Who, when, and where. Like I said, the initial interview should happen in the office. Team gets to meet them. And then what about the questions that you're asking during your interview? I love out-of-the-box questions. One of my favorites of all time is if you could wave a magic wand, wake up tomorrow and have any career you wanted, what would it be? I have to tell you, don't be upset if somebody says, my entire life I've wanted to be a chairside assistant. It's okay if that's not their ultimate goal, but knowing what is says a lot about a person, and you can gain a lot of information about that. My next follow-up question is, tell me what excites you, what intrigues you. Why dental assisting? Why hygiene? Why would you like to mess with our schedule? Okay. Very seldom do I ask somebody why they want to take somebody else's money. I feel like that's a pretty understandable question right there, right? So having your questions set up ahead of time, maybe asking some out of the box rather than what did you hate the most about your last job? What's challenging? What was the most challenging for you? But make sure you follow that up with what was the most rewarding, okay? Be careful of this situation right here, you guys. We're hearing more and more that working interviews are not actually legal in most states, and you can actually set yourself up for for unemployment. So be careful on working interviews. Here's what I'm going to tell you. Check your state laws and small business laws on working interviews to see if you can actually have them or how you need to pay this person, and maybe you don't call it a working interview. Check into that on your end. Once we do the hire, you know, I've already said it before, you've got to set up your onboarding process. How long is somebody on probation? What we do is we provide all of our employees with an expectation sheet. So at the end of 30 days in our office, this is what we expect you to know and be proficient with, and here's how we're going to provide you with what you need to make that happen. At the end of 60 days, here's where we expect you to be and be proficient with. At the end of 90 days, we do a review with the new team member at the end of 30, end of 60, and end of 90 with a ton of documentation. We also make sure that each new employee signs this checklist of expectations to ensure that they understand that we went over this, we talked about it, you understand the expectations. Okay, that's huge. And I find that that is something we don't do a lot in dentistry, and we really should. Building and retaining the team. Many times, we think it's all about the money, right? But it's not always about the money. Sometimes we have to ask ourselves, what motivates our team? What motivates us? Are you a boss or are you a leader? Because there's a big, huge difference between the two of those. Sometimes just being an amazing leader will motivate your team. Sometimes being a boss or bossy is what demoralizes your team. Ask yourself which one of those you are. Communication is huge for us. We're all about team communication. We have team meetings every AM huddle. We have a weekly admin meeting. Okay, just touching base. We have monthly full team meetings. We have an annual strategic meeting and a halfway through the year, how are we doing catch-up meeting. So having your team meeting sparks communication with your team. And again, I'm going to ask you guys this. How do you know what motivates your team? Ask them. You may think it's one thing and it's something completely different. We have a lot of doctors tell us, I just want somebody with an ownership mentality. What exactly is an ownership mentality and how do we foster that? I think really, truly, it's when we care more about the people who are working with us and we want to inspire the people that we're working with rather than just getting a job done. Don't forget, are you a leader or are you a boss? I love this little exercise. Take a screenshot, do something with this one, go back to the office, take this and fill it out. And then what I want you guys to do is which one of those traits, characteristics, beliefs, and values do you possess? Bonuses. Can you give them? What are they for? How do they work? Bonuses should be all about going above and beyond, not just doing your job. And then, of course, there are times when you have an employee. Notice I didn't say team member on this one. When you have an employee, it's just the wrong seat and the wrong bus. It's time to go. Make sure that you have your 30, your 60, your 90-day reviews, as well as annual self-evaluation and team evaluation. And if there's any disciplinary action that's ever been taken, it's documented because you're going to need this information when it's time to sit down with somebody and let them know it's the wrong bus. When you're saying goodbye, privacy is the key. Be careful where you do this and what time of day you do it. I find first thing in the morning is easiest. Be prepared. Don't take it personal and don't make it personal. Just the facts, Jack. Let them know it's not a good fit for our practice. Done and over. All right, guys. Component 3, technology. One of my biggest things, everybody needs to utilize these huge pieces of software we've invested in. The appointment book or the scheduler, the account ledger, the clinical chart where we are charting existing other, documenting, treatment planning, diagnosing, perio charting, all of this fun stuff. There's so much that our software can do for us to help us become more effective and efficient. And we find the offices use about 1/3 of what's available to them. Goes back to that training, right? Continual training and education, making sure that your team knows how to use what you've invested in. X-ray certification, intraoral pictures are one of my absolute favorite things in the dental office. Why, you say? Well, take a look at that top right-hand corner picture. How do you deny that something needs to be done with that tooth, right? Biggest piece of education we have in our practice. We got to make sure that we're utilizing it the way we can. E-services, not just for claim processing, electronic billing statements, allowing our patients to make electronic payments, getting a breakdown of insurance benefits, patient communications, all kinds of electronic forms. As far as when the patient walks into the practice, we hand them an iPad or a Surface tablet. They fill out their demographic information, and that goes back into the software. I believe that RevenueWell now has electronic forms for patient use. You should check into that. And then, of course, tracking. I'm all about the phone system. How many times does your phone ring a day? How many times was it answered? What are the hours of the day that it rings the most? What are the top questions? The ability to be able to record conversations for training purposes. This is the kind of technology we should have in our practice. It's almost 2019. So having that balance, when you ask, what is balance-driven success? How do I find the balance in our practice, in our life? Well, it's not necessarily something you find. It's 100% something you create. Start with your systems, checklist. What do you have now? What do you need? The ultimate goal is that SOP manual. Teams. Without a team, I'm sorry, but you can't run a successful dental practice. How do we get the right people on the right bus in the right seat? And then how do we keep them there, right? And the technology, you guys, again, it's 2019. Technology today in business and in dentistry is amazing. You have to embrace it. You have to love it. I hope you find your balance-driven success, and I hope you have some questions for me. Jonathan?
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, we certainly do have some questions. So the first one is, um, as you're going along talking about working interviews can be kind of a no-no. Do you have any tips on how to judge a person's competency in another way? Or like, is that just kind of the interviewer and the entire team give all their feedback? Or do you have certain questions that you can kind of snuff out how well a person performs at their job?
And I got to tell you, I love working interviews. I think there's nothing like a working interview, right? But it's also very difficult in one day to figure out if this is the right person. So let's say you've decided not to do a working interview for legality purposes. You could have an extended interview. Let them know that it's going to be a 2 to 3 hour interview. And then you could have that SOP manual, Jonathan. So let's say you have pictures of let's say you're interviewing a chairside assistant and you have pictures of the tray setup. Ask them about it. What are the instruments on this tray? What materials in this picture have you worked with? What's your experience with a four-surface composite? Have you placed the band before? So I believe 100% with pictures and with a great SOP manual, you can ask the right questions and get a feel for if they really answered the interview questions correctly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes complete sense. Um, let's see. You definitely alluded to it, and we did have a question about the aging and the 90-day buckets and y'all's percentage. Can you go into that a little bit more?
You bet. So so when we're looking at aging counts, let's talk patient aging first, your accounts receivables. We're going to take a look overall, which is your current, your 30-day, your 60-day, and your 90+ day. That should be 1.5 times your monthly gross production, first of all, okay? Second of all, I'm not overly concerned with a current or a 30-day bucket. Where I really start to pay attention is 60 days. And think about your buckets, you guys. This is how much money a patient owes you and how long they've owed you, okay? And statistics say once you get past like 60 days, you only have a 65% chance of collecting that money. So for us, a 90-day bucket should be 0. We want nothing in the 90 days. And how I can look at those numbers and know, when you have a net production gives you what you have available to collect. We want to see 98% of collection. So just for numbers purposes, let's say my net production is $100,000 and my team collected $80,000 this month. Well, I'm way under, right? That means I have $20,000 available to collect that we didn't. And now it's going to go into an aging account that I have to start sending bills and calling patients to try to get them to pay. So that's our patient aging. Let's talk about insurance aging. With today's technology, electronic claims, electronic attachments, insurance companies dropping money right into our account, not sending a check, your 90-day bucket should be 0. Now, you're going to have some of those companies who will do absolutely everything they can not to pay, but still you want to be on top of that. So rule of thumb, this is what we tell our clients. You need a minimum of 3 hours a week to work on just your accounts receivable. Go to a closet, go to an office, shut a door, put up a sign, do not disturb. 3 hours a week minimum to work on accounts receivables, and 3 hours a week minimum to work on insurance aging. And this is where having those job titles and responsibilities is key, right? Because you don't want to be looking at each other each week going, okay, who's going to make the calls this week? That should already be clearly defined.
Awesome. Let me see here. Okay. So you mentioned a personality test that a staff could take. Do you have any specific tests that you recommend or questions?
Absolutely. So at Practice Dynamics, we are licensed in DISC, and it's a capital D, small I, capital S, capital C. Although there are hundreds of licensed providers around the country. DISC is really awesome. It's 4 different personality or listening styles. So DISC stands for something different. We find, and scientific research has found that everybody has one. Most human beings have 2 characteristics, and some even have 3 or 4. So what we actually do with our clients is we provide this DISC testing to the entire team to kind of figure out what personalities are where. Do we have too many personalities in one area and we need a different personality over in a different area? It's kind of like Bristol Myers. That's it. Yeah, Bristol Myers is another one. So you can actually Google personality or listening styles and get some great information. Of course, you can reach out to us as well.
Awesome. Thank you. What else do I have here? On the subject of bonuses and raises, do you have tips for how to motivate a team to really get them across the finish line if they're really hardcore seeking out a raise?
So this one is particularly money based. So the raise and the bonus has to come from the growth of the business. If we can't afford what we're doing right now because our production isn't there and we're not collecting the money, we can't afford to pay additional money. So I like it when the entire team is involved in the bonus system. And what we actually do a 3-month average. So we take net collection. We have a 3-month average, and we look at our BAM. Okay, so the BAM is, what is the bare minimum that it takes to pay all the bills, keep the lights on, and pay the team? So our BAM is, what do we have to produce and collect every single month? And then let's pick a number over and above that, and we say every month we're going to take a 3-month average, and once we get over our BAM, we take 20% of that and divide it 14 ways, or how many team members you have, okay? And so it's 100% about the growth of the practice and the health of the practice, not just going above and beyond or, you know, I scheduled 3 new patients today, so I should get a bonus. It can't work that way. It has to be about the business.
Wonderful. Well, I think that's it for the questions. So, Lacey, if you have anything to add, now's the time to do it, or else here's the end of the webinar.
Dang, we busted through that, Jonathan. I talked fast. Ton of information there, you guys. Thank you all for joining in today. I know I kind of almost fire hosed you with information. My contact information is up here. Please feel free to email me with any additional questions that you have. Love RevenueWell. Jonathan, thank you for inviting me, and it was awesome.
Thanks so much. We really appreciate it. Everybody have a nice day.